Welcome to One-on-One. I'm Greg Bassey, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper, and today we have our local delegate back to give us her report from Annapolis. She's the most frequent guest we've had here on One-on-One, Delegate Mary Beth Carozza. Welcome, Mary Beth.
Greg, it's so great to be home, and I first of all want to congratulate you upon receiving the Salisbury Chamber's award for the year. I know that's very prestigious, it's well earned, and we're also happy that the Salisbury Independent is doing so well and sharing the news about the entire community.
Well, thank you. I learned from politicians how to stuff a ballot box, so that's how we were able to win the Chamber Award. But thank you for that. Now, before you left for Annapolis, you gave us a little rundown on what was going to happen, and now you're back with the report card. So how was your 90-day session?
I think it was very productive and successful, and we always start with the Governor Hogan's budget. We are constitutionally, our responsibility is to pass a balanced budget. And as we've talked about before, the governorship in Maryland has one of the most powerful budget authorities in the nation, in that the governor proposes the budget and the legislature can only cut the budget. But it does allow us also to fence off priorities. So if the governor has supplementals budgets, that we're able to negotiate with him on some of those priorities. So Governor Hogan came in early this session, and he introduced a very fiscally sound, responsible budget. And it kept us on track in turning Maryland's fiscal house, putting it in order. But at the same time, it fully funded our priorities. And as we work through the budget, each year the House and the Senate takes turns on who goes first. The Senate went first, and they made some changes to the governor's budget, but not that many. When we received it on the House side, we continued to forge ahead, and we ended up with a budget that ended up with $445 million as a cash reserve, $1 billion in our rainy day fund.
Wow.
And again, no new taxes, and still funded our priorities. So I'm thrilled with our work on it. As a member of the House Appropriations Committee, you sit in endless hours of hearings, you go through the detail. I'm on the Health and Human Resources Committee, so one of the biggest departments we fund is the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. I was very pleased with the amount of money we were able to bring back to the local health departments, because they do, the frontline work and they need those resources. So both Worcester and Wycomico counties have very strong local health departments,
right,
and I think they'll be pleased with the support they're receiving from this budget.
Right. Now, I had not heard a lot going into it about a tax cut, but at the end of the session, there was all of a sudden talk of a tax cut. It didn't happen at the end. The governor was a little bit miffed by it, but it would have been the first tax cut since Ehrlich was the governor.
Well, if you think about it, Governor Hogan at the beginning of this session introduced a broad tax relief package. It provided, his proposal provided tax cuts for families making under $50,000 a year. There were also some tax cuts for retirees and also manufacturing. So it was a nice balance. What appeared to happen throughout the process is the House leadership and the Senate leadership liked different parts of the package, or had some of their own ideas of what should be in a tax package. The good news is the fact that we have the leadership in the Maryland General Assembly talking about tax
cutting
cuts.
taxes, which is amazing.
So that is good news. We did not come together at the end, but I expect, and you will see Governor Hogan come back again with a reasonable tax relief proposal that will have incentives for the different sectors that we talked about, and that you'll see the leadership earlier on in the process maybe pick and choose, which tax cuts they prefer, and that we will have a package. We did run out of time, unfortunately, this session, but I think it tees it up for success next session.
We'll talk about what that's like personally, that last day, that last weekend, that last day, all the commotion that goes on. And it's not disorganized, it's just part of government, but there's so much happening in that last 48-hour period.
Right, and there's a contrast from last year and this year. So last year, as you'll recall, we were coming down on the wire with the budget, and being a member of the House Appropriations Committee, I was right in the middle of that. This year, we were able to complete the budget earlier in the process. So what that then allowed is for some of these issues that haven't been resolved yet to work right up to the end. And one of them, as you mentioned, was the tax relief package that I believe also one of the reasons it was not completed is because it was being tied to the paid sick leave bill.
Right.
And as you well know, the House ended up passing it in the closing days of the session, and we were concerned that it was going to fly out of the Senate without the protections that we needed for our local employers.
Right. Now tell me, because you have the resort area, there's a lot of temporary employees down there, 90-day rule. Explain all that stuff with the leave.
So the paid sick leave bill, one of the areas I focused on was the exemption that's needed for the seasonal employers. And as you well know, that our season runs, the summer runs from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and in our case in Ocean City, we think of the season as starting with Spring Fest running all the way to Sun Fest at the end of September. So when it became clear that what they had in as a 90-day exemption would not cut it for our seasonal employers, I proposed an amendment that would allow for a 120-day exemption for seasonal employers, which is the same 120 days that we do for the Affordable Care Act at the federal level. So it seemed very reasonable. We've done this before.
Right.
And although my amendment failed on a House floor vote, on the House side, the fact that we started to lay out the argument and the need for this started to attract some attention on the Senate side. And I was picking up that we were going to be able to work that issue through if a paid sick leave bill was to go through. In the course of these closing hours, there was still talk of the paid sick leave bill being attached to possibly a tax relief package. I think what they found when the Senate Finance Committee had their hearing on the paid sick leave bill, that there were so many questions that employers had, not only on the seasonal employment, but just how on the implementation and what this was going to require of the employers, that the Senate Finance Committee realized that they would have to amend this bill, not just one amendment, several amendments,
Right.
and they simply ran out of time. I expect that we'll see the paid sick leave bill come back next session, but we now have time to work with the employers to see if we can get these exemptions included on the early end.
Right. It was funny, like if you Google your name, you come up with some of the stories and it almost paints you as being anti-labor somehow. But you're answering your constituents in Ocean City who have the short-term employees.
Well, I would say that I'm also responding to the workers as well, because what would happen is some of these seasonal employers would not then offer as many jobs across the board. So it ends up hurting those employees who want the summer work, want the seasonal work. These are often the lower skilled positions and summer jobs that college students need and others. And the result would be that employers would look at this and say, I can't hire as many of these workers because of this paid sick leave bill. So I support a paid sick leave bill if it had the exemptions we need to protect the employers so they could actually offer the positions to the workers. As a matter of fact, Republicans propose an alternative paid sick leave bill, which I voted for.
Right.
So I would support a paid sick leave bill if we could do it in a way that does not hurt both employers and employees.
Right, and that would be a key. Now, I guess if you think about it, not calendar-wise, but you're halfway through your term now. You've had 2 sessions under your belt, so you'd have 4 in a term. So that's kind of bizarre, but I know last year everything was new governor, new members, all new, shiny, happy people holding hands. This year it was a little more partisan, it seemed like, in Annapolis. So what was that like?
Well, I think some of us in our second term or second session that we found our roles, like I became more comfortable with my role on the House Appropriations Committee, and I realized that serving on that committee, there's so many issues that you can work through the budget process because it also gives you the oversight role across all state government. So the approach I've tried to take is to see how many of these local issues we can work through the process, whether it's budgetary or regulatory, and if legislation is needed, then be part of that legislative process. But I usually ask the question, is there any other way to resolve this issue or to address this challenge without recourse to legislation? Because it is a difficult process. Even what some people would term simple bills actually have to go through the entire process and can basically be stopped at any point.
Right.
And so as far as where I'm coming from after 2 sessions, I feel very comfortable serving on the House Appropriations Committee, knowing that I can use that position to advance our local priorities.
Right. A couple of the bills, local bills, were about alcohol. Certainly in Worcester, they're trying to disband the dispensary system, and you got pulled into that one a little bit. In Wicomico, there was the effort to allow alcohol to be sold at the Civic Center. Do you want to talk about those bills?
Right. The alcohol bills, they have to be worked through, and fortunately, I have a very good relationship with the chairman of that subcommittee, who's a Democrat, Chairman Charles Barkley. And when I first got to know him, when we advanced the distillery bill last year that allowed Secrets and other businesses in Worcester County to go for that license. And again, my competitive juices were revved up once I found out that Secrets was going to Delaware for their production, and saying, no, we should be able to do this right here in Maryland, in Worcester County. So by working that bill, I got to know the chairman. So when these other bills came up this session, the 2 that you mentioned, one affecting the Civic Center and the other with the Worcester County Class A license, I was able to seek his guidance, because these alcohol bills they can be pretty complicated, and particularly the one in Worcester County, when we're trying to wind down the Worcester County government, get it out of the liquor department, but do it in a way that is cost effective to the county, fair to the private sector. There was a bit of a balancing there. We ended up striking the right balance, because the bill that was introduced on the Senate side was one version, another version was on the House. We ended up in the middle, which I think shows that
that's how it's supposed to work in theory.
That's the consensus. And we will move forward on that. With the Civic Center, obviously the conversation revolved around the fact that there was a history on this and what you could and couldn't do, and something being discovered that if you went and sought the legislative remedy, that you could, have this license to have alcohol at the Civic Center. And it seems to me that can be carefully managed. I know that there were conversations with County Executive Bob Culver about that, working with the delegation. So even though they seem like simple alcohol bills, they have to be worked through.
Was there much public feedback on the Civic Center alcohol? Did you hear from constituents at all on it?
I did not. I saw some of the letters that were in the various publications about it, but I did not hear from a lot of constituents on it.
Yeah, because I don't really have a sense of where the public is on it. I've always been told the public's very much opposed, but I have not encountered that myself. So that's why I was wondering if you're getting that kind of feedback.
Not on that issue.
Yeah. What kind of issues do you get a lot of feedback on?
Well, I wanted to bring up my bomb threat prosecution bill.
Exactly. That was an amazing process that you went through on that, yeah.
And that is an issue where I did hear from a lot of constituents. And to me, I'm very excited about the passage of this legislation, and particularly want to thank the locals that got involved in Wicomico and Worcester County. And when I say got involved, I'm talking about, State's Attorney Matt Massarella, Bo Oglesby, personally coming up to testify. Dr. Fredrickson here in Wicomico County with his team. He brought both administrators, we had students from Worcester County, we had a principal, we had teachers, and what we tried to show with that bill.
This is reaction to the bomb threats that were being called into the local schools.
Exactly. And as you'll recall, I met with Bo Oglesby back in December before the bomb threats even started. It was almost like he and Deputy Sheriff Mike McDermott were prophetic as far as
Right.
what ended up happening. They sat down with me in December, which I think is how all good legislation starts, talking to the locals. And they brought up this issue and said it was a bill that had been introduced in the past but didn't make it all the way through. And they explained to me the issue that you would want to be able, that law enforcement would want to be able to have the tool to prosecute where the bomb threat actually affects. And the example that Bo Oglesby used was when there was a bomb threat made from Wycomico County but impacted Shell Elementary in Worcester County.
Right.
And because of the venue, he could not prosecute.
Right.
So it was something that, you know, makes common sense, had been introduced in the past, had not made it through. So if you fast forward a little bit, I went ahead and with local input and in a bipartisan way, bipartisan co-sponsorship, introduced the bill early on. Then there were a series of bomb threats, as you well know, across the shore, across the state of Maryland, the Delmarva Peninsula, that brought a sense of urgency to this issue, to the point where on both of our House and Senate hearings, this team of locals came up and personally testified. And I have to tell you, when our colleagues on committees see that type of united front come up, law enforcement, school administrators, the general public come up in unity to testify, that bill takes priority. That shows a sense of urgency, and I really want to thank the local community for that type of support and involvement, because the bill did pass unanimously.
Right. So this will help the prosecutors on a local level
Yes, it will.
get some kind of justice.
Yes, it will.
Yeah, that's terrific. That really is. Now, also in Wycomico, the elected school board, we're going to get a referendum on that.
Yes, and that was one, again, as you know the history of this,
Yeah.
that legislation did not go through last session, and there was held a series of public hearings to get the feedback of where the public might be. Did they even want to move forward with having the option of an elected school board? We clearly heard yes, yes, yes on that. I attended a couple of those public hearings that were held throughout Wycomico County. And I have to tell you, the feedback that I was hearing from my constituents and the hearings that I participated in, not only did they want an elected school board, they tended to support a fully elected school board. This legislation will put the options on the ballot.
Right.
To keep the present system in place, to have a fully elected school board, or to have a hybrid, a mix of the two. So we were successful. Again, I'm also finding out that any type of school board issues are not simple and can also get mired down. There were some in other counties that became
Huge fight in Anne Arundel County.
yes, huge
Which
in
has a
Anne
hybrid
Arundel
system.
County,
Yeah.
and really became very partisan as well.
Yeah.
I'm proud that we moved, once we had the hearings and we had the legislation in a bipartisan manner, we did move forward. We were successful, successful hearings on both the House and the Senate side, and we're able to get that through. So again, sometimes you need a session to work through an issue before it will actually pass, and then you come back the next session, and we were able to get it through.
Right, and they learned a lot from the last session about what not to do, and this time they went into it, I think, a lot better prepared.
That's correct, and I think that maybe those who were opposing any type of elected school board heard the message loud and clear,
Right.
that the public wants an elected school board. And I believe the reason they want it is you want to hold those folks accountable. I mean, these are the folks that are dealing with our children's education, and they should be held accountable.
Right. Now, County Executive Culver in his budget has included some disparity grant money. The governor hasn't signed the bill yet, at least when we're recording this. I don't think he's signed it yet, but I'm sure he's going to sign it, and that's going to be a good thing for Wycomico County.
It is, and again, that was a push. That was Delegate Carl Anderton's bill, and it was a push with the whole delegation at the end. It literally was passed, just I think 23 minutes before
Right.
sine die, and that starts to put Wycomico County on more of a fairness track with its local disparity grant. I do believe we'll see next session, as Senator Eckert has pointed out, that there will be an overall conversation about local disparity grants, and I imagine I'll be right in the middle of that, serving on the House Appropriations Committee.
Right.
So some of these issues, again, they come up this session, and that they will to be continued next session.
Right. And also Wycomico with schools, good progress on our West Salisbury Elementary. That's gotten through the hurdles. Some tensions here locally about how big to build the school and how much to spend, but the state's come through on their end, which has been great.
And those issues are difficult to work through sometimes. And sometimes when people raise issues about the funding, it's not that they're not supporting the school construction. Right. But they're trying to make sure that we get the most bang for our buck. We had the same situation in Shell Elementary, where some questions were raised about how much money we were spending on a new school. And so the question wasn't, are we going to move forward with the new school? The question is there a way to move forward and bring the price tag down? So I often am in the middle of those on the House Appropriations Committee to figure out, yes, we want to do this. Is this the most effective way? Are we getting the most bang for our buck? So I was pleased to see that we were able, again, to move forward on that.
Right. Governor's still in the spotlight. Early in the session, his vetoes from the previous session were overridden. I'm sure that was painful. But he was very involved and, again, showed great personality and character through the entire session.
I think overall, Governor Hogan has just set a whole tone of how he governs. He's inclusive, he's bipartisan, he's reasonable. He even makes a point to say, I don't care whose idea it is. If you have a good idea, bring it forward. And I believe that we will continue to chip away and have successes. I would like some of those successes to come faster, but I also realize that this is a process. And I'll go back to the tax relief. I think that's going to be an area where last session we got the first break for the military retirees.
Right.
That happened under Governor Hogan's leadership. This year, this session we came back and we were able to get, we were able to work through the bill for the Northrop Grumman with the 10,000 jobs and
big tax cut for Northrop Grumman.
And that's a big deal because there's 10,000 jobs, and we actually heard from locals on the shore that support that because they understand
10,000 of the highest paying jobs in Maryland.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, that was another bill that Governor Hogan personally worked on. He sought out Democrats, wanted them to understand that how important this was across the board, and that he was, as he worked this piece for Northrop Grumman and the 10,000 jobs, he also wanted to work these other pieces for the tax relief for families under 50,000. So a lot of that is communication. It's the governor putting himself out, making sure that people understand where he's coming from, and in listening to the concerns. And again, we see progress made every session. I believe we'll see even more progress next session because there now seems to be some agreement that we want tax cuts. It's which ones are we going to pick and choose and put together a package that's fair for all.
Right. I mean, he fascinates me because he's kept his charm through his illness, and he still seems to work really hard.
He works really hard. I'll tell you, Governor Hogan also is so gracious. He's opened up Government House to the legislators, and there's informal sessions and the conversations that are being held on a bipartisan basis. He includes all of his cabinet secretaries and senior staff. He includes, both members of the aisle, and that's when you can see that discussions are being held. People are truly listening to see, how we can move forward. And it's tough, though. Governor Hogan, when I think about his personal struggle overcoming cancer and the grueling schedule, I mean, if we think the 90-day legislative session is grueling, Governor Hogan is living this every day, as chief executive officer of the entire state. And again, so much of it, he's leading by example and by deeds.
And in the middle of the session, his sister became ill and passed, and he left to go at her bedside. It was just amazing to me.
It was. And I think he felt the support and the love from across the state.
Yeah, that's incredible. I have to ask about sprinklers. As you know, I think it's a silly issue personally, and everyone tells me I'm wrong on this. Chris Adams' bill for the local control thing didn't get out of committee. Then there was some talk about some tax relief to try to pay for sprinklers. How did it all end up?
Well, I'm very concerned about this issue, and I'll bring case in point. I periodically attend the local town council meetings, and this came up in Willard's, in the interim, and they flagged this basically to say, if this goes forward, this means that for us to enforce it, we're not going to be able to allow the hookups for the sprinklers for new construction. And right now, that is the policy that Willard's has gone forward with,
Right.
which tells me that we have to do something.
Right.
We can't put, people in that position, either the town council or the people who want to do new construction. So
Because they're trying to react to a state mandate.
right. And so what I'm going to do over the interim, because it is an issue that we do need to work on, I'll continue to work with Delegate Adams and the delegation. We need to pull in MML, the Maryland Municipal Association, so concerns like Willard's can be addressed. And, whether we provide some relief from, waiving some of the penalties that they're concerned about, or whether it's the tax credit that was proposed under one bill, or whether it's just a general overall regulatory relief. I believe that there are options that we can either pull something from each one, or maybe there's an approach we haven't even discussed yet. But I'm absolutely committed to working on this issue. As a matter of fact, I just returned home, and one of my first follow-ups is to call Steve Warren at Willard's, president of the town council. I've already talked to their attorney just to see, okay, what can we do now in the interim? Let's make sure we're working with your municipal association and see if we can provide some type of relief.
Is it still fun going up there, or are you getting used to it too much? Is it still kind of electric when you're there?
Yes, I'm very happy to be home. At the end of the 90 days.
And you come home all the time. We see you all the time.
I would come home every weekend. My routine ended up being, I would go back home, go back to Annapolis on Sunday night, work all week. I would normally stay later on Friday because just with appropriations, there's usually so much wrap-up work. Try to make it home by Saturday and attend all the local events. We had, the fire company dinners, the Farm Bureau dinners,
Right.
and the chamber events and various other local events. I am excited about serving. I think that I can take the local ideas and concerns and translate them into, okay, what can we actually realistically work on in Annapolis? And, we're fortunate that Governor Hogan is, very interested in the shore, loves the shore, and he has cabinet secretaries and senior staff that when we bring our shore priorities to them, they are very receptive, and they are trying to, find ways to get to yes. Where I think in the past with certain departments, particularly the Maryland Department of the Environment and the Department of Natural Resources, there was a tendency that it was just say no, but not really help folks find a pathway to yes. And of course, we have to be in compliance with the law and these regulations, but we can question the interpretation of some of these regulations. And if if an individual or company is trying to comply,
Right.
It's the responsibility of those state departments and agencies to help those individuals to be successful in complying. And so I found, even throughout the legislative session, I was doing a lot of what I call constituent casework, trying to help individuals and businesses navigate the system so they could be successful in either growing their business or seeking the appropriate licenses and permits so they can continue to be job creators.
Right. She's Mary Beth Carozza. She's our delegate, Worcester-Wycomico delegate in Annapolis. Mary Beth, thanks for being in here today.
Thank you.
We hope to have you back, I guess, in December, January when you leave next time.
Okay, another update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and one-on-one. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.